Hello, and welcome to the A's and B's of Horror. I'm your host, Jim, and with me as always is
Mark.
and we have a special guest today. Joining us today is one of my favorite authors, David Slayton. Hello, David.
Hey.
Hi, thanks for having me on, guys.
You have no idea how excited I am about this. I'm not going to get tired of saying that, no matter how much wine I have. So I'm going to give the people that do actually listen the backstory about how I found you, or found your books, I should say. I think it's kind of stalkery, but so I recently, in the last 2 years, I've really gotten into like urban fantasy type stuff, the Jim Butcher and all that kind of stuff. But I was really looking for something that had a gay character as the central character. And everything I found was so sexually explicit, and sex was like the number one aspect to the entire story, and that's not what I was looking for. So I was doing some Google searches about urban fantasy type stuff with gay characters, and I believe I went on to Goodreads, and I was just looking through their list, and I came upon your books, and I started with White Trash Warlock. That was first, right?
Yep, that's the first one.
And I was absolutely in love. I cannot say enough good stuff about that book. So without getting too much into the books, I'm just going to start asking my questions. First, I want to know who and what inspired you to start writing?
Well, it's one of the reasons that I connected with you is pretty much what you were looking for. I had the same experience you did. I've always wanted to write. I've always tried to write books, and it's only in the last few years that I've been published. But it came from a place of you can't find fantasy or urban fantasy with a gay character, a gay lead, when it's not really um, written from an authentic experience, or it's often paranormal romance. Like you said, it's really coming at it with a lot of sex. It's coming at it from that being the main focus. And while I have romance in my books, because I always like to include a love story or something along those lines, it's not the focus. I don't write romance. I write urban fantasy and epic fantasy. And like you said, there just isn't a lot of it out there by us for us. And so I saw a gap, and I basically have spent much of my time writing the books I want to read but can't find.
And that is one thing that really attracted me to the work, especially after I finished the first book. The intimacy is still there. Like there's heart, the characters you can connect with. They really, you can, at least I can, understand on a deep level how they feel towards each other and understand their relationships. And the sex doesn't need to be there. And that's, to me, that was just amazing.
I'm so glad you found them.
Me too. What's your character development process look like? Because your characters are so well fleshed out that I find it utterly amazing that you can keep like an entire character straight. I would be confused as all hell, but you do such a good job with all of the characters and their complex relationships, and just making it feel like they're real humans. How do you start that process?
I really think of myself as a stage manager, and they're players on the stage. So Adam, the main character in this series, the Adam Binder series, is pretty easy because he's got a lot of me in him. He's got a lot of my childhood, a lot of my background and traits. So he actually wasn't too hard, right? So I took my younger self as a template and applied a few things. He's nicer than I am. He's a better person than I am, I think, in a lot of ways. He's certainly more heroic. The other characters, though, it really just kind of comes down to constantly asking them. It's a very Socratic process. What would Silver do in this moment? What would Vic do in this moment? So when a character varies more from me, it's simply a matter of trying to treat them as an individual and ask them more and more, how would you respond to this? What is your response to that? And for example, right now I'm writing Rogue Community College, the spinoff to the Adam series. And the main character, Isaac, he doesn't have a lot of me in him. So I'm spending a lot more time just talking to him and finding out how are you going to respond to this development.
Oh, there's going to be a spinoff? Oh, I'm
There
so
is.
excited. Oh, yay.
Sorry, David, I've got a question for you on that.
Sure, Jim.
I know certainly some authors and some actors, etc. Even if it's not explicit in the story about the background or where the characters come from, they will kind of sketch that out before. Is that something you do, or do you just kind of have a overall idea? I'm not going to kind of the details of the background of the character in your head, even.
It's funny, Mark, because I used to be much more free flow. I used to just sit down and just write it through. And now I'm kind of getting a bit more outliney, a little more pre-plotting because I have deadlines, right? So there's a certain amount of, I can't wing it anymore. I really need to think it through in advance because then I can write faster. Another author in urban fantasy who writes in a similar vein is Katie Edwards, and I highly recommend his work, especially if you're looking for that own voices experience. And he is a complete plotter. He goes through and plots everything out. He really gets these heavy outlines and character plans, does all of that before he starts writing. I'm much more of a discovery kind of writer. I do a little bit of the in-between stuff, but I'm learning I can certainly write faster and more efficiently if I spend more time taking notes on the character and getting to know them before I begin writing.
Right. And as far as the plot goes, do you kind of have that just general in your head, the beginning or the first act, second act, third act before you start writing, or do you kind of make it up as you go along, or is it a mixture?
It's a mixture for me. So some writers like Katie are plotters. They plot everything in advance. Some are total pantsers. They make everything up as they go. George R. R. Martin is probably the most famous pantser.
Right.
I'm a tweener. So I write the 5 big scenes or the 5 big moments in the book, and then I pants my way between and connect the dots.
So do you, and again, you probably a mix maybe, do you start with characters or do you start with plot, or is it just a mixture?
I start with character because character is the most important thing to me. It doesn't really matter to me how well a book is written, like plot wise. If the character isn't intriguing to me, I just don't. If I can't connect with them, I'm less likely to finish the book. So I really start with the main character. And so far all of my main characters are male, so I can say he. How does he deal with the problem? What is the problem he's trying to solve? And then how, what's in his way? And so I take a very Socratic process to all of it.
Right. How do they solve the puzzle of whatever is in front of them, right?
Yeah. And what would happen if I put, a monster in the room? What would happen if I put them in this very difficult situation? How will they deal with it?
Right. Okay. Jim, back to you, because I know you've probably got a bunch of questions.
Well, I honestly don't have a whole bunch of questions. I just have specific things that I want to talk about. So,
I have a few things. Well, you go ahead. I've got a few other things I want to bring about.
From here on out, I have more character-driven questions, like specifically about the books. So you ask your general questions now.
Okay. So, David, a couple of fun things, because I haven't read your books yet. I'm more of a horror guy, and my reading tends to be more audiobooks. It's just an easier way for me to consume it. But since I've started working from home, my reading's really gone down. So I did some research, though, right? So I looked up a Wikipedia article. So can you confirm or deny the following? Your dad was a police officer.
My dad was a police officer for a while. Yeah.
You are a high school dropout.
I am, just like Adam, the main character in the book. I am a high school dropout.
Now it all comes together.
Yeah. However, you did go to college and you got a degree in history.
I have 3 degrees in history, English literature, and a master's in computer information systems, because that helps pay the bills.
Right. Right. So you've also done some convention work, right?
Yeah. I will be at New York Comic Con actually this weekend.
I was going to bring that up.
That's awesome. So myself and Jim, we never met. We met each other on like different Facebook groups, but we actually both live in Florida, and we find out we both go to the same convention here. I love going to conventions, but it must be a real blast for you to meet your fans and have that sort of interaction.
There is nothing like it. I don't even know how to describe to you the feeling when a completely random person walks up and says, I follow you on Twitter, or we've interacted on Instagram, and I love your books, or I've listened to your books or read them. And it's funny, Mark, that you mentioned that you're an audiobook reader, because that's my primary form of reading these days too. And my publisher, Blackstone, that's how they got started, was pure audiobook. So I was ecstatic when Blackstone signed me, because they do an audio same day release. I love my narrator, and I should mention,
He's awesome.
yeah, he does such a good job. Michael David Axtell, and he's phenomenal. It's funny, he sometimes his picture gets sent out for things instead of mine on, and I'm like, that's fine. He's a good looking guy. They might be a little confused when I show up instead, but yeah, he does such a great job. And I should tell you too that Jonathan Mayberry, who is very well known in horror, read and blurbed White Trash Warlock. So there's enough horror in there that I get a little bit of horror crossover fans.
It's awesome.
Oh, I don't disagree. And well, Mark, go ahead and finish your questions before I start jumping into the books.
Okay, I've got a bunch. So
That's okay. I have time.
So, David, you also, I believe, you go to like different libraries, colleges, or high schools, and kind of give them some of your knowledge. Is that right?
Yeah, I speak to writing conferences when they'll have me. I also speak a lot to high schools, and I've been lucky enough to speak to 2 different community college. I started out, and again, I got my GED and trying to figure out what to do with higher education. I started out in community college. So the fact that I can go speak to community college writing groups or classes has been really nice way to kind of pay it back.
Right.
I really believe strongly in that. And I get to teach again this month, actually, the day after my release for the 3rd book, Deadbeat Druid. I'm going to be speaking to the Community College of Aurora at one of their writing days.
That's awesome. Must be very rewarding.
It's great. And if you ever start to feel really down about the world, here's my secret. If the world, which sucks a lot of the time, is really frustrating you, go speak to young people. The younger people that are coming up right now, they've got their stuff together. They're amazing. I always come back from one of those experiences feeling like, okay, it's going to be all right.
Yeah, the future generation will save us, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
They're pretty together. They're really cool kids.
You also used to, and probably still do, write poetry. Is that right?
I don't write poetry much anymore. I did start out as a poet. That was kind of where I thought I was going to be in a creative place. And that's actually how I got to Denver, was a scholarship on poetry to the University of Denver. But I don't know. I felt like at some point I moved away from it, but I think you sometimes still see a little bit of that infusing my prose. My epic fantasy that's out next year, Dark Moon, Shallow Sea. That's a very poetic title. And you'll feel some of that poetic prose, I think, in the language from time to time as well.
And I kind of feel like fantasy might be the optimal genre that you can actually weave poetry into your story too. Right?
Definitely.
You're also a video game fan? Is that right?
I am a huge gamer. I am a giant nerd, and proudly so.
Now we need to know what games.
Well, I'm basically staring at my Mass Effect ship collection as I speak. The Mass Effect trilogy is probably my favorite, but on PC with the mods, so that male Shep can romance Caden from the very beginning.
Okay.
It completely changes the whole tone of the story if you've got the romance from go. I love Skyrim RPG, any kind of deep RPG like that. So Bethesda stuff, BioWare stuff like Dragon Age. I already mentioned Mass Effect. I would love to write for one of those one day. That would be like a dream come true. So really, though, Starfield is going to be out next year from Bethesda, and you'll lose me for a full week. I hope I don't have any deadlines, because I'll probably just take a week off my day job and just lose myself in that world.
Have you played Elden Ring?
I have not played Elden Ring, which is funny because Dark Moon Shallow Sea has a lot of a Dark Souls vibe to it. It's one of my comps to the book. Right. I do love the atmosphere. I get frustrated with the constant dying, though. I really liked Bloodborne, in the Souls style, and I really like the Dark Souls vibe and the atmosphere of those games, but I haven't got to Elden Ring yet.
Yeah, I'm more of a casual gamer, but I really love the look of Elden Ring, so I picked it up, and I'm like, this is wonderful, and I love the story in it. I love the narrate. I love how the characters talk in it. But because I'm a casual gamer, I played it for a while, and then I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this. I just can't do this anymore. I can't get past the first boss. So I'll go play something easier.
I devoured Hades, and Hades worked well because as a rogue, one run takes me about 45 minutes in total. So it's like, okay, I've got an hour. I can play that on a lunch break, or when I stop my day job before I start my writing shift at night. Okay, about an hour. I can commit about an hour. So one Hades run is a good way to spend that.
Well, that's good. That's good. Jim, I'll hand it back over to you. I have some more just in my back pocket if we end up getting to them. But Jim, go ahead.
Well, that's okay. I don't mind. So you already talked a little bit about Adam, the main character in all 3 books. Well, soon to be 3 books anyway. So you mentioned that a lot of his background is based on your real life experience. And I know you, if I'm not mistaken, you grew up in Guthrie, right? Which is where his childhood was set. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I have to say, growing up in Guthrie, Oklahoma, well, I should say growing up in the woods outside of Guthrie, Oklahoma in a trailer probably wasn't the easiest place to grow up as a nerdish gay kid. But
I can imagine.
But I had a very weirdly magical childhood, and at the same time, I had a kind of horrific childhood. It's a strange mix. We would disappear for days on time in the summer, playing in the woods, and I remember wandering the fields with my brother on these long, long walks and finding cattle bones and skulls off in the fields. And we were about half a mile from Lake Liberty on the swampy end. And we would go fishing anytime we wanted. There was water moccasins everywhere. We had to watch out for the rattlesnakes on a sunny day. So I had this very rural, I was shooting guns very young. I was fishing. But at the same time, I was this very obsessed with Star Wars and Doctor Who and Star Trek and reading as much as I could. So I had this weird mash of interests and skills. It still is funny to go camping with friends of mine now because they think of me as this very urban, writer dude. And then I'm like, okay, I brought my gun in case there's a bear and we need to scare it off.
You're sitting there skinning an animal with your teeth. You're like, what?
They often forget I'm half redneck. So it is always funny to bring those skills out and show them off.
Right. I can only imagine that's quite a juxtaposition, those 2 worlds. So in the first book, Adam meets Vic, who becomes his love interest / boyfriend further on in the series. Who was, or should I say, what was your inspiration for that relationship? Because it's very deep. Like it's not just a surface relationship where, oh, he's hot, I'm interested. They connect on a very deep level, and not just because, well, this is a little bit of a spoiler, because Adam gives him a piece of his heart to try and save his life in the first book, but it seems that their connection runs very deep.
Vic so what's really nice about writing Vic is Vic Martinez and his family are a mirror to Adam and the Binder family.
Right.
So they're, in some ways, it's a bit of an opposites attract situation. So you have Adam, who is rural, white, poor, high school dropout, uneducated, but he loves to read. That doesn't sound like anyone we know.
No, not at all.
We have Vic Martinez, whose mother is a professor here in Denver, who was educated, raised with a very different value set, urban, right? They just have very different perspectives. And the main important thing is that the Binder family is very much like my family was, Midwestern, very secretive. We don't talk about things. We don't want to discuss our feelings. We don't want to discuss bad stuff that's happened. Whereas the Martinez family talks about everything. So the easy place to start with Vic was understanding that I wanted a mirror to Adam to hold that up to him, especially my favorite scene in the first book in White Trash Warlock is when Adam meets Vic's family, because Vic is a bit out of the picture at the moment. Again, like you said, spoilers, but it's such a fun contrast, and it's a funny scene because Adam is just overwhelmed by these people because they're so different than what he's used to. And I loved getting to hold that up to him and show him, hey, there's a completely different way to be about the world than the way that the binders handle it.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that I appreciated was his, you could really feel his shock through the story that, you know, when he was first met Jesse and the dog was one of my favorites, Chaos.
Chaos is great.
But I thought that mirror, I mean, it comes through obviously, because that was the next part I was going to bring up. You know, Robert, who is Adam's brother, and Tilla May, his mom, they have a very, I almost want to say twisted relationship, but through the course of the book, you find out why. But how do you navigate all those little twists in their relationship and keep it straight?
Well, you just have to think it through and in some cases plot it, but it's really about inhabiting the perspective of the character. It helps that in the first book, the point of view is split between Adam and Robert, his brother. And the second book and the third book, it's Vic, right? Because at that point, we've pretty much told Robert's story largely. And so he's kind of able to slip into the background more. And Vic's story is more emerging as a new point of view character. So I like changing the POV around. But just kind of inhabiting what keeps them going. For Robert, it was getting away. You know, he grew up Bobby Jack. He didn't want to be associated with Oklahoma, that backwoods background. He was very smart and he was able to get out. And again, that's a lot of what I felt like. So I was able to give him some of myself and because I can feel that. But his emphasis does tend to be on, you know, money and things that he considers signs of success.
Right. And go ahead, sorry.
Oh, and for Adam, it's much more about the human level of, did I help somebody today? Did I make somebody's day better? And that Adam's working at a much more, I think, human level than Bobby is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very easy to understand as you're reading the book that Robert is trying to rise above his beginnings, almost to the point where he just wants to forget that his life was never not what it is now. And it's very evident, in my opinion. So my next question, you brought up Silver and his counterpart Argent, his sister. How do you keep the mythology straight? Because I know you have Silver and Argent, who are, if I'm not mistaken, we're supposed to represent swords. And then you have Vran, who's supposed to represent cups. How do you keep all the mythology straight?
I think part of it is I've just been working on it for so long. A lot of these concepts I was working with as a teen and in my 20s. So when I started writing the book, I had a lot of it in my head already. It has reached a point now with 3 books where I had to take notes and go back. I still have to open up it's nice having them on Kindle because I can open them on my laptop if I need to search for a phrase. Like, for example, I forgot what color Adam's eyes were. When I was writing the second book, I'm like, are they green or blue? I think they're blue, but I might have changed them. So I had to go Google it. I had to go search through the Kindle version to make sure I synchronized it for continuity. At some point I might make a slip, I'm sure, but it is, I do try to take some notes. I try to write them down. Argent and Silver are, I don't know. I want to do more with them. I'd like to get more into their story. And I'm happy to say they both show up in Rogue Community College in the spinoff. They will have a little bit more to do there, especially Argent. And
I love her. I'm not going to lie. I absolutely love that character.
She's a fan favorite. And people always ask me to try to describe her. And she's 50% Mae West and 50% River Song from Doctor Who. Like, I think that's a really good way to squish her together and understand her mindset.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. That works for me.
Yeah,
I would really be interested to see more of. And I'm not gonna lie, I would be really interested to see more of their dynamic. Like, I don't want to give out any spoilers, but there's a situation that happens in. Actually, I think it was the second book. Yeah, the second book, between where Silver increases his station, I guess we'll say. So I don't give anything away, but I would really be interested to see more in that vein, especially with those two, because I love Argent. Silver's a bit complicated, but I love those two characters personally.
It is funny. I do get a lot of people who really want I wouldn't say a lot, but I have some readers who really want either it to end up with a throuple of Adam, Vic, and Silver, or are very team Silver and want they want Adam and Silver together. It's kind of a weird thing in my head because I feel like Adam, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but Silver's an interesting character. He's complicated, and I'm hoping I get to tell more of his story in time. I'm sort of waiting to see how the third book, Deadbeat Druid, does. I'm hoping I get to write more in Adam's series. If not, then perhaps more in Rogue Community College if that series gets to continue. And if none of them do, I might just have to self-publish a novella that sort of gets it out of my system. Silver is always on my mind. Argent's fun because she's such a catalyst character. She's really powerful, but she's very dynamic, and I have to watch out or she'll take over the whole book and suddenly it'll be her story.
She could do that. She could do that very easily. I could definitely see that. In the second book, you bring up Vran and his court, which I believe they're supposed to represent the suit of cups.
Yeah, they're the water. The sea elves are represented by the cups, as it were.
Right. Are you going to do more with him? Because he was a fun character. His banter with Adam was a lot of fun to read, in my opinion.
I adore Vran. Vran is an idea. He's almost like a mental virus. He has been in my head for so long, and every time I start writing a book, Vran pops up and says, "Is it my turn? Am I on yet?" And I've had to push him out of so many books. So finally, Trailer Park Trickster, we got to bring him on screen. I got to use him and get him out of my head. He does definitely come back in Deadbeat Druid. And so Deadbeat Druid is a road trip through hell, down Route 66 through the underworlds, or in this case, Route 666, because I can't leave a cliche like that unturned.
Right, of course.
And certain Adam tries to set out on this alone because it's incredibly dangerous, but of course he doesn't get to go alone, and Vran decides he's going to hitch a ride and come along. So we do get a lot more Vran and Deadbeat Druid.
That doesn't surprise me, just from that character and their interactions in the second book. That does not surprise me at all.
He is a delightful brat. I really love Vran.
He really is. So the question just went out of my head. Mark, why don't you go? I had a question and it just went straight out of my head. So give me a minute to recoup.
Go lay down for a minute, Jim.
Yeah, okay.
No, David, I was reading your website earlier on. I thought it was very interesting. You did a blog post about advice for new writers or up-and-coming writers. And you had kind of this a formula to really get people to understand, the editing of a book and where to put the plot and the pacing, etc. And just to run that down for our listeners, it was basically to get like the first 3 novels of a successful author in a genre that you want to write in, right? Tear out all the pages after you've read them, dissect them using a spreadsheet, and then use kind of that spreadsheet as a template for your own story to try and kind of fit those beats in. That seems like a lot of work. Do you do that? Or like, I'm sure you probably don't do that now, but like for your first book or your first even unpublished books or writings, did you start that way, or is that just something that you picked up along the way?
I wish I had started that way. So I first started out by trying to write an epic fantasy. I had no idea what I was doing, so it turned into this 200,000 word like Jello monster that was running all over the table. And if I had started out with that process, I would have been so much better off. So now I'm writing a thriller. That's something I'm working on. I wrote a rom-com this year. I wanted to say last year, but it was this year. Time has no meaning now. So whenever I write a new genre, that's now my process, is I go out and find the first book from 3 different authors. So when people want to write fantasy, they look at something like George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire, or they look at Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn, or they look at Patrick Rothfuss, that's not what you want to do. You want to go and find Elantris, Sanderson's first book, much smaller. You have to crawl before you can run.
Right.
And so many of us make that mistake of, multiple points of view, these massive books. What I learned was, and I wasn't getting published, I'd written a few of those. It wasn't getting anywhere, mostly because I was trying to do too much too soon.
Mm-hmm.
So what I had to learn to do was slow down and analyze. One of the other, probably the largest mistake new writers make and this is all very much about traditional publishing, I should say. Traditional publishing has a lot more guidelines and rules.
Right.
And word count is the biggest problem. So again, I wrote a 200,000 word book. Well, no one's going to publish a 200,000 word book by an untested author. That's a lot of paper. That's a big risk for them. It's a much bigger advance. It's much bigger shipping, all of the costs for a bigger book. All of that comes into play in a publisher's head. You want to try to start out thinner. You want to start out with a tight word count. And the best way to do that is look at successful first books. Also, those writers are going to level up. I certainly now, Deadbeat Druid, I feel like is the strongest thing I've done. White Trash Warlock is good. I'm really proud of it. But I've learned so much. And you can see that as you read. You level up book by book. So don't try to start with somebody who's, doing a masterful job of 12 different points of view and hundreds of thousands of words. Start small. It's easier to learn from that. Emulate that. And of course, you're going to make your own plot, your own characters. I'm by no means recommending that when you analyze these books, you're ripping off anything. But understanding word count, chapter by chapter, understanding the beats of how things flow, that is incredibly helpful to you. Because by the time you've really analyzed 3 books inside and out, like I'm suggesting, and outlined them and captured the word count, look at the emotional formats back and forth and how things shift around, by the time you've done that for 3 books, you now understand the skeleton of the novel and the architecture.
I'm currently putting my 500,000 word tome on a bonfire. I'm getting rid of it.
I have a 200,000 word one. It should probably be buried in the backyard in a lead coffin, right, with the curses on it, because it's.
So another part of your advice was getting that initial manuscript critiqued by a group of people like you kind of trust in, right, that know what they're talking about. But it kind of leads me to, do you read like critic reviews and just the general person's reviews, and do they affect you at all?
They do. I kind of wish I didn't read them to a degree, because sometimes they can kind of hurt. I get, to be just fully honest, I do get some pretty homophobic ones sometimes, and I can get some pretty mean ones. The hardest reviews you'll often get are from aspiring authors, right? And I think that whatever that says about them. But taste is so subjective. And if I start to feel like the reviews are affecting me emotionally, or they're kind of seeping in, all I have to do is go to Goodreads and look up one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors and read their 1 stars. And say, don't agree at all, right? Like, this is a book I love. This is a book that haunts me. And then here's somebody who just completely hated it. So taste is so subjective. And that's okay.
And I think it's part of the human condition, certainly in this day and age. Whenever I go to buy an object that I need or want, I go and research that. And, it could have 10,000 5-star reviews. But the ones, you kind of like look at it, oh, it's a 1-star review. Okay. But then you have to like kind of tell yourself, okay, those are the minority. But that's kind of what you're drawn to sometimes. I think that's just
totally. I've gotten a couple of negative reviews, for example, that wish there was no romance, right? And I've gotten some reviews by readers who really wish there was sex scenes, and it was like, and I don't take those very seriously for a couple of reasons. Mainly because I'm not writing paranormal romance, right? And I think as Jim was kind of saying in the beginning, a lot of when you look at my work, it tends to be adjacent to paranormal romance a lot. So a lot of people are looking for something that has a lot of sex scenes. But that's not, I'm writing urban fantasy. I'm not writing, paranormal romance. But I get it. There's a lot of crossover readers in those genres. And I don't take that as, criticisms. Like I'm not serving what you were looking for anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
True.
Yeah. I have one more kind of fun question for you, and I'll hand you back over to
Sure.
Jim. So for White Trash Warlock, Trailer Park Trickster, Debbie Druid, if they were to be a series of movies or just a series on HBO or whatever, would you have, if you could choose any director and any actors for your main roles, who would you choose?
This is current in my brain, right? And this changes every 5 minutes. Also, I know that, and I will say this is one of those things my agents are out there working on, right? If we can get anything sold, but so I understand that if that happens, I would never have any actual control over these things. For Adam, my current ideal Adam is Sean Grandilio, who's currently in Oklahoma in LA. And he's done some horror stuff. He did the Scream TV series on MTV. He was the love interest in the last season of The Real O'Neills. So he's played gay before. And I think he's on James Corden actually last night or tonight for Oklahoma. He looks to me like he looks like Adam. I think he's got the right look. I think he's the right height, hair color, all those things. My ideal Vic changes constantly, but kind of the actor that I think fits it really well is Danny Ramirez, he's played Torres on Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The guy who'll be inheriting the Falcon wings. And I think he was in the new Top Gun. I haven't seen it. I think he's got again, Vic is Mexican. He's definitely somebody who needs to personify that. And I think those two would fit well. But it changes constantly. And then direction wise, I just watched the 3rd season of Umbrella Academy, and I'm like,
fantastic, right?
Yeah, this showrunner would know what to do with my stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. And I got to say, I have no objections to either of those people being cast for either of those characters. But the bigger question is, who would you cast as Argent?
Man, Argent is a tough one. So I've thought about this long and hard, and I've struggled with it a lot. But hear me out. I wasn't entirely sold on this until I saw her at the Rise of Skywalker premiere in this dress. Kelly Marie Tran, who played Rose in The Last Jedi, and then was very badly sidelined in Rise of Skywalker. And I'm still grumpy about that. When I saw her on that carpet with this blue sparkle dress, I was like, because Argent is supposed to embody a lot of that old Hollywood style, but with a much more kind of kick-ass vibe. It's like, okay, she could really pull off a great Argent.
Yeah, I agree. She could. What about Silver? You have to have some ideas.
So Silver has a couple of forms, right? So most of the elves do. They have different looks in time. And Silver, Osric Chow, if you know him, he was on Supernatural a bit. He was most recently in Alien at the end of Star Trek Discovery season 4. He did a great job there. I would love him for young Silver. And then Ludi Lin, who is on Kung Fu and was in the recent Mortal Kombat movie, as well as the last Power Rangers movie. I think he would make a good Silver. Because he wears a lot of what I've seen him like in pinstripe suits and stuff. He kind of affects that gangster style sometimes in his dress, the way that Silver does.
Yep.
And then another alternate kind of there, again, because Silver has many faces, Louis Tam, who I really just feel like somebody needs to give this guy more to do. He's amazing. He was in Into the Badlands, and I'm happy to see he's in this new rom-com playing a love interest.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'd be on board with any of those, actually. I mean, because I'm not going to lie, I did Google some of them while you were talking so that I could see their faces, because I'm terrible with names.
Here's a question for you, Jim. Sorry. Jim, who would you play
I wouldn't. I'm too. I couldn't get in front of the camera.
No, no.
It's hard enough to get me behind a microphone.
Which character do you most identify with, maybe, if any?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I identify with is Adam's family, because the relationships are so twisted. And a friend of mine from Brazil has a saying, and I've never heard anything more true. Family is only beautiful in pictures.
Oh, that's a great saying.
Yes. And I never felt like everybody's got a complicated family, right? Everybody's got things that they don't want to talk about, or that they don't, that have gone on that other people wouldn't understand coming from the outside. And I've never felt more connected to a family unit than I did to the Binders reading this book.
I'm both like honored to hear that and also sort of sad. You know what I mean?
Jim's got a cold dead heart.
He does. And you'll hear this a lot. If you ever listen to any of the other episodes, Mark likes to make fun of the fact that I'm not currently alive. I'm unfeeling. And I do tend to rate movies pretty hard. So there's a question that's probably going to come before the end of this discussion that will be quite funny, I'm sure.
All right.
So give us an idea of the direction that we're going to see in the third book, because I'm probably going to be in the minority based on what you said earlier, and I really just want Adam and Vic to work out. I'm rooting for those two so hard. You have no idea.
I think you'll be happy with how things go, but it's my friend Liv said this to me, and I thought it was such a great phrase that I like to break my characters because they're like glow sticks. You have to crack them for them to shine. So
True.
They both go through some stuff. Definitely. I need to close the casting because it's still in my brain. Again, since I just watched Umbrella Academy, Justin Min, who plays Ben.
Yeah.
I think Ben would make a great Silver as well. I think Justin would pull that off.
He is. I have to agree with you. The actor that plays Ben has played two different versions of that character, and he's done them both phenomenally.
Yeah, I really love seeing the depth of what he could do. I was like, okay, yeah, he could handle that alternate faces or multiple face thing well.
Yeah, I agree.
So book 3 is the road trip from hell. So this will be a bit of a spoiler at the end of book 2. So mute here for 30 seconds if you don't want to know. At the end of Trailer Park Trickster, we finally got the bead on the big bad of the series. Adam knows the identity of the dark druid that he's supposed to hunt down and kill, and at that time they managed to get rid of him, but when they did, Vic fell through a portal to we don't know where.
Right.
And book 3, we start out with Adam and Vran learning that Vic has fallen into an underworld. And the only way to get him, it's a long way. They're going to have to drive. So Adam, Bobby, and Vran start out on a road trip through hell to get Vic back. And on the other side of the story, the other point of view, we have Vic, who's trying to find his way out. He fell with Adam's messed up cousin Jody. And of course, nothing in my stories is ever quite what it seems. And we've realized that the whole point of this was orchestrated so that they have one more thing to do while they're down there, which is bring back the lost heart of Death herself.
Sarah, how did I know she was going to be involved?
Because she always is. And
she
to
is.
answer that question, my dream cast for Sarah is Nicole Byer.
Okay, I can see that. I can definitely see that. That was she's another character. Like she turned out from being like in the first book, you don't understand the depth of her involvement in the story. But once the events of the second book start to unfold and you start to realize how involved she really is, oh man, I want her to get hers so bad. her and Jody both. She has her
reasons, and by the end of the third book, you really understand why her motivations for everything that's happened so far have been laced through. I think of these first 3 books, and I do hope we get more, as the death arc, right? And if you look at the covers, Blackstone did a very cool thing where there's this very faint silver gloss pattern on the front that wraps around it, and there's a skull right at the top in the center, because this is the death arc. And that alludes to the fact that everything that happens in these first 3 books has been brought about because of her machinations.
See, now that means I have to order the hardbacks because I just have the audiobooks. So
Well-
you have the pleasure of this is going to sound really creepy, but I've experienced a lot of firsts with you, David. I've never reread a book ever in my life. And after we talked on Facebook, I listened to both books again. So, and Mark, you'll be happy to hear this. When I read the end of the first book, I got a little choked up. I didn't have that reaction the first time, but the second time, even knowing it was coming, it was a little. I had a little feeling there, Mark.
That heart is beginning to beat slightly.
It is a little.
Thank you, David.
I feel like I've reanimated you. Don't
a little bit.
And I'll do this. I'll send you some copies. Let me send you some copies, Jim. But also for your listeners, I have some Kindle and Audible codes I'm sitting on. So if any of your listeners would like a copy of White Trash Warlock, email me at author@davidarslayton.com and just give me the email address that you'd like it sent to, and just, tell me you're responding to the podcast, and I'll send them a Kindle code for White Trash Warlock.
Oh, that would be amazing.
They
don't know what they're getting. It's beautiful.
It's the Audible ones, David.
And Mark, I'll send you Audible codes, and Jim, awesome. I'll send you paperbacks. So.
Oh, that would be amazing.
That is so
you have no idea how happy that would make me.
I want to warn, and you mentioned hardbacks. The hardback editions that are available now are the large print for visually impaired. So you don't really want the hardbacks because they're the big print ones. So
yeah, that's probably true. As long as I get the covers, because I've seen the cover arts and they're beautiful.
I'm really pleased with the Blackstone artists. It was Sean Thomas and Sarah Riegenliger. I'm sure I just butchered that pronunciation. But they did an amazing job on the art.
Yeah, they did. They really did. But all three books are the detail on the artwork is just gorgeous. And that's not even seeing him in person yet. So, Mark, are you done with your questions?
I just have kind of a very general. So today is Clive Barker's 70th birthday, and with the new Hellraiser coming out in Hulu. David, what do you think about the increasing amount of minority representation, I think, within like the entertainment business, but also kind of the social media backlash to it? I mean, are we progressing or are we getting worse, or is the vocal minority just, the minority?
Well, I think it ties in, Mark, to... So, for example, my first two books on Audible are now on Audible Plus, which is kind of like the Kindle Unlimited, right? If people have a subscription, they can listen to pretty much anything in the Audible catalog, which means that I've pushed beyond what I would think of as my core audience or people seeking me out, because, people are browsing and say, oh, White Trash Warlock, what's that about? Which means that, again, I'm getting listeners to my audiobooks who normally wouldn't go seek me out. And that's generating, in some cases, a few fairly homophobic responses, right? Of, ew, gross, guys kissing. And occasionally a nice homophobic response, which is, don't really care for stories about gay characters, but I liked this book, right? Which is, I think, a good thing. So for me, I see it in a way as a positive. I know that seems like a way to flip it around, but the reaction is you're seeing more of an audience included at the table. You're making the table bigger. I mentioned Rose in The Last Jedi. I want to see more people at the table. Again, I write what I write because the books that I want to read don't exist, so I have to write them. And maybe there'll become a time when, there'll be enough of them out there that I'll be done writing. I hope not, because I love writing. But ultimately, I see it kind of as a positive and these companies, it's just good business, frankly. Christian Serrano, the designer, I always love this example. He makes, I'm not a fashion person, that I share that with Adam, but he started making designer gowns and dresses for plus size women. And doing so, he tripled his business. And people say, why are you making gowns for Lizzo? Or why are you making gowns for Nicole Byer, or these larger women? And the simple truth is, he's like, it's just good business. They want gowns too. They want dresses too. I'm just filling a need in the market. I mean, good old capitalism at work. And I think it's the same thing here. There are so many people I know that are watching the new Chucky show
Right.
Mm-hmm.
just because it has a gay character. And people who never have watched Chucky before are interested in that because of that inclusion. And for me, I'll admit, I've gone my entire life, 40 some odd years here on Earth with, let's go back to Star Wars, right? I watched Star Wars. Here's a franchise I've loved my entire life, or Star Trek, and I didn't see myself in this thing, and I was kind of over it. Discovery comes along, and Star Trek has two guys in a relationship that's really healthy, despite everything else going on in
Yes.
the necessary drama of TV, which is great. And I feel included, and I feel more invested in this franchise just because I feel like I have a seat at the table. I feel that I'm welcome. And that's not having that in Star Wars. It's amazing how much my interest in Star Wars has kind of waned because I just don't, I don't feel welcome at the table. And I feel like what you're seeing with Hellraiser, what you're seeing with Chucky, all of these franchises, somebody's waking up and saying, you know what? Black people watch TV too.
Right.
Yeah.
Queer people watch TV too. Other people beyond straight white men. You mentioned video games. We talked about video games for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Women are, the last statistic I read on this, video gamers are largely in their 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and they are 55 to 60% female.
Mm-hmm.
People think gamer of, young
20-year-old.
Yeah, 20-year-old guy in his parents' basement.
basement.
It's not it. There's a lot more women out there. Games that are now making it more inclusive. Again, it's just, for me, I love it because I see us all getting more seats at the table. I see more people being welcome in. Writing rooms are changing. There's more media for different people to consume where they see themselves represented. But beyond that, I mean, it's just good business to be inclusive.
Like my favorite game that I played is The Last of Us Part 2. Which has a female protagonist who's gay. But I love the storytelling in it because it's not like it makes any difference, right? Well, if you swap it out for a male, or a male and a female, it all still works. And the beauty of that game is that it's just done so matter-of-factly. Right. I mean, there's nothing shocking, or I guess it might be shocking to some people, but it's just like these are just human beings and they're just trying to live their life. And it's a wonderful narrative. And you kind of go back and forward with a couple of different protagonists and antagonists. But it's that sort of storytelling that I like, where it's just not like it doesn't make any real difference to the viewer, one way or the other.
And Mark, you and I talked about that on the last episode where we actually started talking about this book series that David wrote when we talked about The Cabin at the End of the World.
Right.
So I've read or listened to the audiobook, and they have the same treatment. It's just a gay couple with their adopted daughter. There's nothing weird or out of the ordinary. It's just, and they get terrorized by these people that just show up in the woods. Now, mind you, the book just wasn't for me, and I don't think the movie will be either. But the relationships is there, and it's just a solid, normal relationship. And that's what I appreciate so much about David's books. Is it's just a normal relationship. It's just that the two main components happen to be of the same sex.
That's why I'm so excited about my epic fantasy next year. Is I got to make an entire new world for it. And it is dark and creepy, and there are blood-hungry ghosts and all sorts of conflict. And again, it's got Dark Souls as a comp. It is not a happy world, but it's devoid of racism. It's devoid of homophobia. It's devoid of sexism, and nobody cares about those things. Now, what God you worship,
there's the question.
Yeah, there's the thing that might get you killed.
That's like my upbringing, David. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, so I grew up in Northern Ireland, and it's the only country in the world, and this has happened to me, that somebody will say, "Are you Protestant or Catholic?" Neither. I'm an atheist. And people turned around to me and said, "Yeah, but are you a Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist?"
That is the most Northern Ireland thing I've ever heard.
It totally is. Like some of those people just did that over there. But race isn't a big thing over there. I mean, it's generally white people for the most part. But certainly whenever I lived there. But everybody always has to have some sort of thing to get angry about. And over there, it was religion and sectarian politics. But it's like I don't care about all of that. And most people don't. That's really a minority of people. But that's generally where you hear the news from, the minority that are.
Mark, of all the reasons people have to dislike you,
Right.
Religion is not one of them.
No. They've got plenty of reasons.
That's right.
I just want to add one more thing, just as we're talking about Clive Barker, who did you meet him at Spooky, Jim?
I did not. I don't believe he was there the year that I started going.
Super nice guy, but with the new Hulu Hellraiser, it's got a trans woman playing Pinhead. The thing that I've seen, and it might be because people understand maybe Clive Barker and he's gay and where all that comes from too. There hasn't seemed to be the same backlash that I've seen that I expected from having a trans. I'm trying to think if there's another major like horror movie that had a trans actor as the lead role, but
I don't know how well publicized that was though, Mark, because I didn't know that until you told me.
And I didn't know. Doug Bradley said it in an interview.
Right. So I don't know how well known that actually is.
I think it's probably pretty well known now because social media tends to.
Well, that's true.
Once it gets around, it goes around. So, I mean, fingers crossed for the future.
Agreed. So, Mark, do you want to mosey on into our what we've watched?
I can, but David, is there anything else you want to talk about before we do what we watched?
No, I just appreciate the chance to get to be here and talk to you guys. So, thank you.
Oh, you have no idea how excited you've made me. No idea.
Thank you for being a glutton for punishment.
Yes. Thank you for that.
I've actually watched a bunch of stuff, Jim. I don't know if you wanted to start off with yours, or I can start off with mine.
Well, why don't we let David start since he's our guest?
Oh, there we go.
You don't have to be so upfront. David, why don't you give us an idea as to what you watch or read?
I try to read whenever I'm working in one genre. I try to read something completely different. Right now, I managed to get an early release of A History of Vienna, which is fascinating. So I tend to read nonfiction when I'm writing heavily into fiction or to kind of feed the compost heap in my brain. Or I read mysteries. Like I just read some cozy mysteries by Josh Lanyon, her stuff that can be really good. And just something very different than what I'm working in, right? So since I'm writing something supernatural right now with Rogue Community College, I'm trying to stay away from anything kind of paranormal. So reading-wise, I've been reading the Secrets and Scrabble series by Josh Lanyon, a series of self-published cozy mysteries. I've been reading that History of Vienna. I think it's just Vienna. It's sitting in the other room, or I could tell you the title. And then TV-wise, we haven't been watching a whole lot. I caught up on Rick and Morty. My nephew got me into it. And
yes,
I found it so cynical for a while, but they're starting to peel back layers on these characters, particularly on Rick. You're starting to get more about why Rick does the things that he does. And that I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to care. So I have a little bit more to think about with it. And then we just finished watching Umbrella Academy season 3 last night. Fantastic, really amazing way of handling an ensemble and a dysfunctional family.
Agreed.
It's funny because while I consider it kind of a comp to Rogue Community College, Rogue Community College is not as dysfunctional. It's a little more hopeful. So,
okay,
I might have to change my pitch a bit on this, but I really just love, particularly some of the performances in that. Aidan Gallagher, who plays Five, that kid can act.
He can. He is amazing.
I mean, he pulls off 80-year-old in a 16-year-old body better. I just can't even express how well he does that. And I love the relationship between Diego and Lila, and there were just so many really cool things. And speaking of inclusion, I thought the way the show handled Elliot Page's,
Mhm.
I 100% agree. I thought that was amazing.
yeah, that Vanya becoming Victor was so just. That's exactly what I think everybody would want, right? If
Yeah.
I'm still pissed at you and you're still, you're still a total F up, but at least I'm not going to dead name you, right?
Right.
I just thought that was like, God, I am so mad at you, Victor, right? No one's slipping back into that kind of transphobic reaction or anything, anything like that. It's like, I'm mad at you, Victor. It's like, that was well done.
Right. I have to agree. I was curious as to how that was going to be handled with the series, but I thought they did a great job.
And again, I thought just getting to see Justin Min play a completely different version of Ben
Yeah.
and getting to hear the cast or the characters, contrast, like our Ben was like this, you're a dick. Like that was such a nice like back and forth with him and getting to see little pieces of who he might be underneath that crustiness.
Right. Yeah, I do agree. I loved the Ben in the third season and how it compared to the Ben that we had seen previously. Anything else?
I think that's about all that my brain can handle right now.
I can understand it. You are in the middle of a lot right now.
Putting me under deadline always puts my brain in a pressure cooker, so I can handle Rick and Morty and I can handle
David, you're obviously a fan of history. You got a history degree. Do you ever listen to the Dan Carlin Hardcore History podcast?
I haven't listened to it in a number of years, but I think the most memorable episode, and this will tell you how far back it was History on Drugs, getting into the whole relationship of methamphetamines to the German advances.
Right.
And it really took my research in a fun direction. I have one of the fantasies I have yet to finish and publish is alternate World War I meets necromancy meets gay Tolkien, and that getting the research that he kind of brought me to in that episode has stayed with me for years. So yeah, I need to catch up on it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that podcast. He's great. Okay, Jim.
No, you go first, Mark, because I don't have much this week.
Okay, I've been watching some different series and movies, so maybe I'll just flip back and forward. I randomly came across this movie on Amazon called Horror in the High Desert. This had a very plain cover, but it was billed as a kind of a talking heads mockumentary horror found footage. This thing was an hour and a half. And although I watched it all the way through, this really should have been probably a 45-minute movie. There seemed to be an awful lot of paddings. I do like mockumentaries, and even like talking head mockumentaries are really good too. In general, I just like that style. This one, it was just stretched out too much. It's about a guy that went missing out hiking. A lot of the talking heads is kind of like his family and just talking about, well, he was so good at hiking and what happened and this. It should have been, if it was 45 minutes, would have been much better. 2 out of 5, 4 out of 10. So we'll go to, let's see. Okay, this is interesting. I started watching, although Paramount Plus started fucking up, so it wouldn't keep loading it. A documentary called 11 Minutes. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
It sounds familiar.
It's about the Las Vegas shooting.
Oh, okay.
From the Mandalay Bay.
Yeah.
And that place was a war zone because they have footage of, obviously. And I didn't realize how many people were at that concert. There was like 20,000 people. And it showed how large the concert was. And, people are obviously got their phones out. They're videoing the concert. And people are like, what's going on? And it's like, this is minute 2, and it's like the first volley.
Wow.
And then it kind of goes back and forth. And actually, a kind of an interesting story. My wife, his friends. There was a DJ playing there. He's very famous. Like, I'm not into country, but he's a country DJ. I don't know. But he was there, kind of headlining the DJ part of it. And
Okay.
he had brought his infant son or daughter. I think they were like 2 or 3. You know,
wow.
he shows him bringing them up on stage and stuff. But my wife's friend is actually his mother-in-law, and she was there. And obviously, the concerts at night whenever the shooting started. So she was babysitting the grandkid, but she was like next door to the shooter.
Wow.
But yeah, so I'll say it again: horror movies do not scare me. Nothing in a horror movie scares me. Real life stuff frightens me. Like, I'll watch documentaries or the news that will scare the hell out of me, and that's one. I didn't even get to the end of the first episode, but just like the shooting, and there was, you saw people on the ground doing like CPR on people. It's just harrowing. And my wife's like, why aren't they getting up and running away? I'm like, everybody's crouched down. There's thousands of people around you. It's, I don't know how many people are going to stand up and make themselves a target and try and get through all these people. I'm just surprised more people weren't killed. But anyway, that's 11.
Humans will do the most vile things, much more horrific than any horror writer will come up with.
Oh, sure.
It's terrible. But anyway, sorry, I digress.
As a history fan, I can guarantee you. Look up scaphism. David, I don't know if you know what scaphism is.
I don't, but I just also watched Caitlin Dowdy's video on the wreck of the Eastland in Chicago. And I don't really know if the wreck's the right word, but the Eastland disaster, where it happened about 10 years after the Titanic, and it was far greater loss of life. And one of the sociologists that she talked to in the video posits that the reason we don't remember it, because it was a far bigger loss of life, was because the people on board were poor, or were not as, they weren't famous or rich, or there's no myth or icon around them. But it was harrowing to read. And one of the things that happened was, in the rush to try to escape, people were crushed, or as people were drowning, weighed down by their clothes, pulling other people down as they were scrambling for help, trying to grab onto someone who was swimming, and accidentally, not intending to, but trying to save themselves, and accidentally drowning both them and whoever they had latched onto.
The panic kills so many people.
It's one of those reasons, I live in Denver. We had the Aurora shooting. When people talk about, a good guy with a gun in a situation like that, where someone has, unleashed smoke bombs, or, the panic, I can't even imagine somebody in a crowd like that trying to draw and return fire while you have a stampede of people in a panic with smoke. And yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they said 2 ways, right? So the good guy with the gun could potentially kill other people by accident, but they could also get killed by the cops too, because if the cops are coming in, they just see somebody with a gun, they'll turn around and shoot them too. So.
There was a very clear recent case of that, where a bystander with a gun took down the shooter, and the cops arrived and thought that the bystander was the shooter and took him out.
Wow.
That was very, very recent, just the last couple of months.
I think I think a lot of people in the U.S. don't travel outside of the U.S. So whenever you tell people, most countries, people don't have firearms, it kind of blows their minds a little bit. Pardon the pun.
It's funny, because when I would leave the country before the pandemic, and I try to leave as much as I can. Again, I grew up very poor. I'm a high school dropout, so I'm trying to fill in gaps and see more of the world. My mom would always be in a state of, before she passed, be careful, Nick. And I would just bring up crime statistics and show her, Mom, my chances of being mugged or harmed in violent crime anywhere in the US are so much higher than Greece or wherever I go, you know.
But even if you were mugged, you could get, you could go to the hospital and you don't have to owe them a fortune.
Don't have to go broke to feel better.
Yeah, the free healthcare stuff is another thing which blows my mind. Like, I talk to people here, and they're so against universal healthcare. It's like, oh, it's socialism. Like, what the hell are you talking about? You're paying insurance company. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that road because let's go try to do
Yeah,
a podcast.
we already did guns. Let's not get into.
We already did free healthcare.
I will. I just have to throw something at that. I had a coworker, and we were talking to some colleagues from Canada, and I will make this really quick.
Yeah.
And my coworker, who had been through a really serious medical situation, mentioned that. He said, "But you pay these taxes," and then we just sat down together as a group and did the math. And yes, they pay more in taxes, but what we are paying for private insurance through our employer, etc., they were actually paying less anyway. So
and all this copay, and it's just even the hassle of dealing with insurance. Yeah. Like, especially people that are very sick, like, you don't want to do that. It's who was Charles Bukowski? In one of his poems, he was like, the U.S. where it's cheaper to die than to go to the hospital, right? It just is. Anyway,
well, I'm going to toss the ball back to Jim.
on that downer note, thank you very much, Mark. What else you got?
Okay, on to more fun things that I've watched. Not pandering here at all. I watched Queer for Fear, the first episode on Shudder, which is delving.
Yes, Mark. You made it very clear that when I told you that we were going to have David on, that you were already watching it, so we get it.
Well, I do love the horror documentaries that tackle just like subject matter. So Shudder had one that was horror noir, all about African American experiences within the horror genre. They had a folk horror one, found footage horror one. This one's actually a series. Those were just standalone documentaries. So far, so good. I always find that when you start to scratch under the surface, right? So you might watch movies or read literature or whatever, and you don't look at it through a certain lens. You look at it through your own lens. But when people of other stripes and ways of life look at something, or maybe that's how the author or director meant it, that you just didn't pick up on. I always find it super interesting, and it adds texture whenever you rewatch like a movie, and you're like, oh, okay, I see now. But yeah, it's so far so good.
See, and you already know my opinion on queer culture and horror. I have the same problem with movies with gay, horror movies with gay characters, or mainly gay, where the main character is gay, that aren't all about sex, or they're not just some party boy that that's just sleeping around. That's one of the reasons I'm sort of excited for Cabin at the End of the Woods, because you don't see that. But there was a movie a few years ago called Hellbent, which
the slasher movie, right?
Yeah, and it had almost exclusively gay characters, and it was okay. It wasn't a great movie, but at least it wasn't all revolving around them, just sleeping around, sort of like that. I mean, and it's so hard to find that. And like you and I had the discussion, Mark, about Dahmer. Did you watch Dahmer, David?
I did not. I'm a little terrified of it, to be honest. I'm a bit of a wimp when it comes to horror, which is funny considering some of the stuff I write. But I've been reading a lot of the analysis of Dahmer, and it's been an interesting reaction in my friend group, to the point where I am a little curious.
And that's what Mark and I talked about, because I watched it for our last episode. I had a very strange reaction to Dahmer. Like this series bothered me more than any other serial killer show or movie based on a serial killer has ever bothered me. And I think Mark and I sort of got to the bottom of it. It's because he was actively attacking gay men. And I think that made me view it differently. Because Mark, you didn't have an issue with it, right?
So my issue with it, the first couple episodes was I just thought it was pretty boring.
Well, yeah.
But I've watched a few more episodes, and it's got a lot better. Even though it's still got a weird yellow palette to it, I know that's a conscious choice by the director, I'm sure. But I mean, it's based on a true story, so it is what it is. Obviously, they're going to embellish some of it. Jim, I just got to the episode where a lot of people, I think were kind of heartbroken by where he had found the deaf African American guy, and he was starting to form a relationship with him. And that entire episode, and you talk about kind of social handicaps, right? Especially in the 80s, gay, black, and he's deaf. That's a hard life to live. But the performance through it, I'm assuming it's fairly close to reality, but I don't know. Like, you just have to be like, wow. But then the hammer's gonna drop.
And that was my issue with the whole series, is they were so, in my opinion, deferential to Jeffrey Dahmer and explaining why he was the way he was, or that why he felt the need to kill. I think the gentleman's name was Tony, if I'm not mistaken. But I felt that they did not give the same respect to the victims. You got one episode about a victim, and then you got an episode that explained why his parents felt the way they did, and that's what bothered me about this series.
But as mentioned, no series about a serial killer focuses on the victims.
Right. And that's when we discovered that it's because I'm looking at it differently, because I'm the community that I'm a part of was directly affected by it.
Well, I think that's part of why it is so hard for some of us, because I remember the stories. I remember the reports that the cops had returned people to him that had, like, the kid that had escaped. Right. I remember that being in the news when this was going down, and the reaction of, well, shrug, of so many people, just kind of like, oh, well, that's what you deserve.
But do you know what's interesting about what Dahmer done? Right, he was using people's, like the cops' biases against them for his own benefit. He knew he could just say, yeah, we're gay, and we just had like a lover's tiff, and they didn't want to look into it anymore because they were embarrassed or whatever, didn't approve. So he used that bias.
He did 100%. He was a very intelligent man.
I think that speaks to something in that the kind of environment where you have to move on the edges of society, where you have to move outside of the mainstream, you can find a certain amount of safety there, but it also obviously increases the risk, because there are people who can exploit that, as he did.
Yep, agreed.
One thing I've noticed, Jim, this is probably going to sound like macabre. So as I'm watching Dahmer, and I know about Dahmer, kind of what he did, but like his dad, right? So Dahmer is like caught masturbating at a fair, and it's like his dad picks him up or whatever, or his grandma. It's almost like a sitcom where Dahmer's doing something like overtly crazy, and they are just picking him up going, oh, Jeff, don't do that again. It's like,
well, I don't think that's it. I think, at least in my opinion, based on everything I've read, because I did read a lot about Jeffrey Dahmer while this was happening, they were willfully ignorant. It was, how much of this can I just let go before it becomes a problem?
Right. And did you see the interview with Dahmer and his dad that they did? They showed it a number of years ago. They'll probably show it again now.
I can't say that I recall it off the top of my head.
It was a very interesting interview because, Dahmer, and we talked about this last time, he's not the sort of person that would overtly try to make somebody suffer, because that wasn't what his goal was, right? He didn't get off on people suffering. He wanted to keep people around him.
Right.
So, but he also knew what he was doing was wrong. And I think that he tried to get himself caught. to try and stop it. So we're talking about, people saying it's, you were saying, and I think it's in general, he's a sympathetic serial killer where really we should be sympathetic to the victims. I think that's in context compared to, some of the other serial killers who kind of reveled in the causing of pain.
Oh yeah, I mean he's not an Ed Gein or John Wayne Gacy or any of those people that
Right.
got off on the violence part of it.
Okay, that's all I've got to say about Dahmer so far.
Yeah.
I'm halfway through it.
What else you got going on, Mark?
Okay, so I kind of went around the world with a couple of different movies. I'll start with one. I'll do a sandwich for you, Jim, here. So I'll do one foreign movie, then the movie that you're going to love forever, and then another.
Before you do this, we have to ask David his opinion. David, how would you define a foreign film?
How would I find it?
Define. How do you define a foreign film? What makes a film a foreign film to you?
Well, to me, filmed outside of the United States, right?
Okay.
And that usually declared, by subtitles, right? That would be the easiest thing. But to me, foreign is foreign to America, so international. Anything outside of the United States, I would count as a foreign film.
Okay. Mark?
Jim, sorry, what is your definition again?
Mine is pretty much a foreign language film.
So do you think The Passion of the Christ is a foreign film?
I mean, yes, because.
So do you think Apocalypto is a foreign film?
I've never seen it. I couldn't say.
What about Prey?
It's all spoken in Mayan.
Prey, no, because that is a Native American language that they're speaking. It's not. That's not
what you asked, Jim.
But it's not a foreign language.
So Mayan is spoken in the U.S.
What? Prey was not in Mayan.
No, I'm not talking about Prey.
I think
what are you talking
about?
Oh yeah, I've not seen that, so I can't talk about that.
Well,
I'm sorry, I thought somebody mentioned the movie Prey.
I did. That was David.
Oh, okay.
Make it easy. The Mel Gibson directed, American-funded Passion of the Christ movie that's all in Hebrew.
It's in Aramaic, actually.
Or Aramaic, whatever. Okay, so it's not English, but you consider that a foreign movie.
If we're holding me to strict definitions, then yes, that would fit my definition.
It's okay to be wrong, Jim. All right, so we won't go down that rabbit hole. Certainly with David on here, he'll just be like, I'm done.
No, I listened to enough episodes to know what I was getting into before.
Yeah. You have no idea how excited that makes me. When I saw that when you said you actually listened to the podcast, I was so excited.
David,
I had to read my text messages.
How did you find our podcast?
I can't remember, but somehow Jim popped up in my Facebook, and then I think maybe someone had commented about my book on your podcast, like in a commentary and on the Facebook group. That was it. And yeah, I looked it up, and so then I started listening to it, and then I decided to write Jim.
Yep. Now you're here.
Now you're stuck with me.
No, absolutely. Awesome that you came on. So let me jump to my first foreign watch. Jim.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
This is an Argentinian movie in Spanish. It's called Nocturna, Side A, Great Night of The Great Old Man's Night. And this was on Shudder.
Okay.
This is not a horror movie, despite it being on a horror movie streaming service.
Then what's the point?
But you'd need to ask Mr. Shudder about that, Jim. But nevertheless, well shot, well acted. It's basically it's about a guy who is 90-plus-year-old, who's basically seeing the ghosts of his past, and it's all about kind of confronting your past and coming to terms with it.
So it's a paranormal film. That's why it's on Shudder.
Well, it's not really, though. I mean, he's suffering from dementia, and it's like working through in his mind.
I don't know. That's pretty terrifying to me. Like the whole prospect of slowly but surely becoming less and less able to deal with your surroundings. That is pretty terrifying. I watched my great grandmother go through that. And it was not pretty.
And I think we talked about that, about the taking of Deborah Logan. You know, just
Yes, we did.
the effects of old age. If you're lucky enough to get there, you know, sometimes you can have some major issues. My wife's grandparents are still alive. They just recently celebrated their 75th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
They're in the mid-90s, but some of their faculties are starting to go. But this movie, it's almost like a Christmas Carol.
Okay.
That's kind of what it reminded me of. Obviously, not in the same way as a Christmas Carol, you know, specific ghosts coming back to take them back to their childhood, but there's very much the theme of the movie and the visuals of the movie. Sometimes he's the 90-plus-year-old guy, but sometimes he'll be shot as a 12-year-old, and his wife would be, you know, young, and it's about dealing with. He never talked with his daughter. What happened to his daughter? And something happens in the apartment next to him, and so they all kind of meld together. But really, it's about one man dealing with the ghosts of his past and his regrets and his guilt, and trying to move through that.
Okay.
I would not recommend it if you're looking just for a horror movie, but if you're looking for an interesting character study, it is a very slow movie. And I almost feel that was done on purpose because he's old, and him walking across a room takes some time, and they show that.
If the characters are engaging, I can get into that kind of slow movie. But if there's not if I can't get a vested interest pretty quick in the character, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, I think, you know, it got pretty good reviews. I overall did not feel engaged enough in this movie to really like it, but I can see why some people would.
Okay.
Jim, do you have something that you want to talk about?
There's only one movie that I've watched that I haven't rewatched 100 times this week, and that's the Irish flick "You Are Not My Mother."
You're not my mom.
No, mother, not ma.
What you talking about, Jim?
So this was a strangely engrossing flick. It basically this mom is having some issues with depression, and this movie centers around her daughter and trying to deal with the fact that the mom is behaving erratically. And I'm not going to give out any more than that, except to say that it was a really interesting movie. It's not a happy film. I mean, the ending is kind of happy, but it's not it's pretty dark, and it's really well done. I cannot speak highly enough about it.
So you would rate that, what, a 4 out of 10 then, Jim?
I'd probably go with a 7.
What? That's supposed to be your favorite movie ever.
It was really well done. I was surprised. Yeah, it was really.
It made him feel something.
It did. That the stuff that girl goes through was pretty intense. Having to watch her deal with that.
Jim, did you watch this after rereading David's books that made your heart start to beat? Maybe
that was during, but I watched it before the end of the second book. So
right. Thank you, David.
So
you're welcome.
As far as audiobooks go, I listened obviously to David's books again, which was a first for me, but they were still just as great as they were the first time. And I finished Cabin at the End of the World, but I think I talked about that last time. And I started another Paul Tremblay book because it's got such great reviews called A Head Full of Ghosts. And this one's starting out with a lot more promise than the last one, so I'm pretty excited about that. It's essentially a girl is being interviewed about her sister's possession experience, 10 plus years after it happened.
Oh, Jim, didn't you watch that Exorcism movie that you were trying to make me watch?
Oh, My Best Friend's Exorcism. Yeah, I thought we had talked about that already. So
how was that?
Did you watch it?
I haven't watched it. I really liked Blumhouse's Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You. So I'm not a giant horror fan, but I do like comedic horror, and I've heard nothing but good things about Grady Hendrix's books.
So I hear great things about the books. The movie misses on so many levels. It tries to bring nostalgia because it takes place in the 80s, and it fails because everything just looks fake. Like the hair is big, but you can tell it's all extensions and crap. The colors are, they try to get the right color palette, but it's just trying to be flashy and doing the jazzercise look for most of it anyway. But it misses on so many levels. Like the chemistry between the two main characters, it almost gets there, and then it just sort of falls apart for whatever reason. It was very weird. I did not enjoy it at all. And then the final battle, it's like them battling what's his name from Lord of the Rings, Gollum. It was not, I don't know. I did not enjoy it at all. I had high hopes for it, so I was disappointed.
So that's a big recommend to our audience then. If Jim didn't like it, it's probably excellent.
I'll try just about anything twice, so I'll check it out.
Yeah, again, it could just be me because I do tend to be hard on films, but especially with the 80s, man, if you're going to try and bring nostalgia, like Stranger Things does it wonderfully. Like they really get their characters to be enveloped by the time rather than just splashing colors and blue eyeshadow and feathered hair and onto a character and trying to make them feel like they're in that era.
My favorite thing with Stranger Things is trying to spot anachronisms, and I've only spotted like 2, so I do really enjoy trying.
What did you spot, David?
The school buses are painted white on top to reflect the sun and cool them. I never saw that before the 90s or the aughts.
Nobody cared.
That's true.
And then one of the air conditioning units outside one of the houses was super modern.
No, I did not notice that.
That is you should work for CinemaSins.
I am. Well, it's funny too because the Duffer Brothers were not, they didn't grow up in the 80s.
Right.
I do.
Unlike the three of us.
Great. Oh yeah, I'm
unlike
old enough.
we were all there. We all remember this crap.
I think the main thing they missed though is that everything would have been steeped in cigarette smoke, right?
It would have. Oh my God. The little tinfoil ashtrays at McDonald's. Oh God.
Everything would have a brown haze to it.
I remembered when they stopped allowing smoking in clubs in Denver, and I was still going out to the clubs to dance back then, and I'd be like, I could wear these jeans again. I no longer want to go home and just burn my clothing.
It's amazing now whenever you look at especially even 70s, 60s, there's hospital scenes and they're all smoking around each other. They're in airplanes smoking.
when my grandmother Tilla May, because Tilla is named after my grandmother Slayton, when she passed, we moved the cross off the wall in her house, and the walls were this deep orangey beige. We moved the cross and they were white.
Oh wow.
Moved in decades, and she had chain smoked them into that color.
Wow.
Yeah, not smoking in Stranger Things, I agree. The kids probably would have been smoking too.
Oh yeah, my sister had me smoking by the time I was 8 so that I couldn't tell on her.
That's the one thing with Stranger Things, there's not enough smoking.
Yeah.
I am not here to encourage it. David R Slayton does not endorse smoking, but it is one thing that's missing.
With those leather pouches that they would stick their lighter down in with their, oh my God.
They probably didn't want to get rated R for hard smoking.
When I fly and the planes still have the ashtray, which is scary enough right at this point, or they have the point where the ashtray used to be on the seat. And you're just like, can you imagine being on an international flight 20, 30 years ago and everyone's smoking?
No.
A nice 20-hour plane ride in the smoke tube.
I've been on a plane twice in my life, and if people were smoking, I would have, no. Mm-mm.
There's the real horror, the smoke monster.
Yeah. Didn't they do that on Lost? That didn't go over well. They did have a smoke monster. That was terrible.
They did have a smoke monster on Lost.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm taking this in an entirely weird direction.
I think that segue was my fault. Sorry.
That's okay. Mark, what about you? That covers everything I've seen or listened to. What about you, Mark?
So talking about nostalgia, here's a 90s trip for you. I watched Beavis and Butthead do the universe.
Oh my God.
On purpose?
It's fantastic.
It is not fantastic. I got through 10 minutes of it. And I used to love Beavis and Butthead in the 90s.
It's like taking on all, the modern day stuff with Beavis and Butthead.
So I equate like all this reboot shit that's going on right now. I equate that to my taste in music. And I told a friend
talk about your yacht rock, Jim.
No, shut up and let me finish my statement, sir. I had this conversation at work the other day, and when I was in I didn't start going out to clubs till I was in my mid-20s when I got divorced, and I was into all the techno and the all that rave shit because I was drinking and whatever. But the only thing that's changed about that music is my taste in music. The rest of it still sounds the same. I just don't like it anymore.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Jim.
Well, I do tend to listen to a lot more yacht rock than I did when I was in my 20s.
You want different vibes. I'm very sensitive to the mood of music. So if I want to, like when I was writing White Trash Warlock, I needed to remember what it was like to be 20. So I would go back and listen to music that I had listened to when I was 20. I was a moody little shit, that was for sure. But I go back sometimes and I put together playlists for every book, and they're all on Spotify if anyone wants to dig them up.
So
I will be doing that because now.
What are some of the bands, David?
Adam he's got a little bit of an emo rock thing going, so he's really into Crown the Empire. He blames Vic for that, but honestly, I think it's more of an Adam thing. The stuff I listened to when I was his age that I was so into was Dead Can Dance, Depeche Mode, Susie and the Banshees. I definitely had a goth emo thing going on.
Okay, I can see that.
So I wonder if somebody can point to a time where goth turned to emo. Is goth dead now? Is it just emo?
I don't know. I think emo is a more emotive. Goth is more of the dead inside feeling. So,
but at this point in pop culture, it's just wearing black. Let's just call it what it is. It's just wearing black and nail polish. That nobody prescribes to that way of life. Like in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, when it was huge, it was just like South Park. You had the kids on the side that all wanted to die or were making death pact, and then you had the people that just wanted to wear black.
I do remember the first time I wore all black in high school, and it was a moment of, oh, okay, now my outside matches my inside, and that was a nice sort of this feeling of relief. And again, Adam he jokes about his brief period in that, because I get it. I think as a teenager, you're trying on different identities as a young adult, and hopefully figuring out where you want to land. So I think it's pretty common for that sort of identity search to occur in that age range.
Yeah, I agree. Like I didn't have the same experience like that. I had a lot of issues with bullying when I was younger, but I agree. There was a point where I wore all black and I asked my mother to buy me nothing but black clothes, and she said absolutely not. But then, when I was in high school, I had a cape made I did a play called I did Camelot, and we had to wear a cape and a hood, and I wore that cape for 3 years all through high school. Nice. Just because you're trying to find myself.
Yeah, my stepmother hated that I wore all black. So one Christmas she gave me this bright red sweater. I came down the next day downstairs wearing black, and she said, "Why are you wearing black again? What happened to the nice red sweater I bought you?" I'm like, "This is it. I bought 2 packets of Rit dye." She was not thrilled.
I can imagine.
I don't know. I still wear my Dead Kennedys and Misfit stuff, so I haven't changed. I never grew out of that phase.
Nice.
Yeah, except now you work in risk management, which is the least emo thing you could do.
Well,
I don't know. It's about thinking about bad outcomes, right? And then
Well, that's
predicting.
true, I guess.
I'm always hoping for the worst outcome. That's my key. All right. Okay. Out of this rabbit hole again. So you're done with Jim. What you've watched, read, etc. Right? What do I have left? I watched. I think I'm trying to think back. I don't think I've ever seen an African movie, as in an African production, African made. Jim, they're speaking French in it. I don't know if that qualifies as a French movie for you. But it's a movie called Salem, and this was excellent. This is also on Shudder. It's I believe it's Senegalese movie, and it's really about these three mercenaries who get this cartel guy from Guinea, and they're trying to take him back home. And they're going to get paid a lot of money for it. Something happens to their plane, and they end up crashing in Senegal into a supernatural kind of area called Saloum. They end up at basically a hotel. It's a number of like different shacks, rooms, like apartments. And it seems to be that there's some people there that might know what they're doing and what they're up to. This movie was captivating from the start to the end. It's got some wonderful cinematography in it. Even some of I even wrote down, because it has like an opening monologue and it closes on this monologue too. It says, revenge is a river whose bottom you only reach when you drown. And it's really about one of the mercenaries has a goal that the other ones don't. And the last act has a supernatural aspect about it, with actually really great CGI, where there's like swarms of insects, but they're not. It's just the way it's like shown, but there's buzzing, but they're in the form of kind of people, and they have to kind of battle against these. But there's a lot more going on in this movie than what I've described. I don't really want to give it away, but this was fantastic. I really recommend it.
Okay.
Jim, have you ever seen a Senegalese movie?
I have not. No.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's all I have. I have not caught up on House of the Dragon. David, are you a fan of Game of Thrones, George R. Martin?
I find it a little too cynical and bleak for me most of the time. I read the first several books in the Song of Ice and Fire, and of course my cat has decided it is dinner time, so he's going to yell at us. Sorry, I warned you it might happen. But okay. I honestly, I'm going to be a bit soapboxy. I find the world incredibly misogynistic, and the need for excessive rape and death of the female characters. I just hit a wall of, I teach at a lot of writing conferences, and one of the things that comes up is, well, I've got to be historically accurate, and I've got to include all this. Well, first of all, that's not historically accurate. Second of all, you're writing with, we didn't have dragons, so no, you don't have to be. So I get frustrated with the misogyny, honestly, in the Martin shows, and that put me off them pretty much. Also, I've got enough darkness in my head. I don't need to spill more in. So yeah, I backed off of those pretty quick.
Finally, somebody gets it. That's why I don't watch dramas for the most part. There's enough drama in life. I don't need dramas. Let me see somebody getting gutted, or let me laugh my ass off.
That's very dark, Jim.
I know.
I like comedic horror, but anything that's a little too realistic, I back away from that. So I don't go. If you read my books, you pretty much figure out I grew up with a lot of abuse and really awful situations. Don't really need to seek it out in my adult time.
Although it is October, David. Do you have any Halloween favorites you would put on around this time of year?
I really do enjoy the comedic horror stuff. So Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yep.
Yes.
is an absolute favorite. I'm really loving Alan Tudyk's show, Resident Alien.
Love it.
Set here in Colorado and get so much of it right. A little bit of it wrong, but it's still a lot of fun. Love that show. It's just very witty and cute and dark at times, darkly comedic. I love Tucker and Dale, the Happy Death Day movie. I watched Happy Death Day, the first one, just on repeat. You know how sometimes you just want background?
Yeah.
I just let that movie play sometimes. I've seen it way too many times.
So,
But I love the character development.
Have you been able to hear our story about that movie?
No.
So I refused to watch it for 2 years after it came out. And there was one reason, and that Mark makes fun of me because this is one of my stupid reasons for not liking something.
Oh God.
I hated the character's name. I would not watch the movie because she's named Tree.
I think it works though because she's supposed to be super annoying, right?
And it did, right. So once I finally watched the movie, I loved it. But I refused to watch it for 2 years because of her name.
That's completely valid. But
David, David. That is in no way valid.
People can be like, you've got to see this. Everyone loves it. That I will be contrarian and be like, no, you told me I have to, so I won't.
No, but you wouldn't not
about that?
watch something that you're interested in because of a character's name.
I'm trying to think if I've ever done that. If anything has really just put me off. It might have been Buffy. Buffy might have been the thing where I was like, that's just too stupid for me to deal with.
Are we talking the movie or the show?
The show. I never could get the movie. The movie I still didn't enjoy. Which my friend Chris would kill me for saying that. He's got like the poster on his wall. But it's I have to come to things in my own time. Music is a really perfect example of that. My friend Marnie will give me these amazing albums. Like, this is so good. And she's like, did you listen to that? I'm like, no. And then 6 months later, I'm like, that's so good. I'm like, why did this take you so long? Like, because I have to get to it in my own time. I have to be in the mood for it.
Yep. Agreed. And that's exactly what happened. I had nothing else to watch and Happy Death Day came on and I watched it and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. Now let's go back to Buffy though. We need to talk about that a little bit. So I loved the movie. I thought it was campy and fun. I refused for 3 years to watch the show because I felt that they were trying to make it too serious. But boy, was I mistaken.
Now I'm starting to think maybe Mark has a point.
It only took a few seconds of me not butting in and just hang himself on his own words. So.
It is funny how, and that's one of the reasons I'm not too mad about people who like will read my book or not finish it, or because I've tried to pop open a book and like I'm not connecting with it, and I come back to it like a year later. I'm like, oh man, this is the best book ever. Like it has to be part of how I consume media in any form. I have to be in the right mood for it.
Agreed.
So, David, this is what I have to deal with. Honestly. so Jim has commented that he doesn't like a movie because a certain character has excessive hair on their knuckles. Do you think that's a valid basis for not liking
Mark, wait. You're conflating two stories. I broke up with somebody I was dating because he had hairy knuckles.
Oh, okay. So the other one was about somebody's got like their hair dyed incorrectly or something, right?
Well, that sounds like me, but I can't verify that because I don't know what you're talking about.
He's not a pedant at all.
No, not at all.
I'm just in my brain, of course. I'm like, I can just see him like, okay, bringing, waving a guy's hand too close to a candle or something and singeing off the knuckle hair. There, problem solved.
Yeah.
Like in that moment in Ugly Betty when the guy puts the gum in the other guy's beard. He's like, I told you to shave off the beard and you wouldn't do it, but that's okay because now there's gum in it now and now you have to. What? And he sticks gum in it at that moment.
That would not be unlike me. That's the sad part.
I'm shocked that Jim likes werewolf movies, to be honest with you.
They scare him. Hair scares him. I think we figured that out.
Snakes are the only thing that scares me. Hair anywhere except on the knuckles is okay.
There's
something probably Freudian about your snake fear.
Sorry.
No, because I can narrow that down to one physical thing. I cannot handle the way they feel when they move. It's disgusting, and it makes me want to jump out of my skin.
How they feel? You don't have to touch them, Jim.
The only reason I understood why I didn't like snakes is because somebody threw one at me.
Oh, here we go. We're back to Jim's therapy session. Okay, Jim.
We're not going into this. No.
Who hurt you?
I tell you, high school.
Sorry about all the snakes in Trailer Park Trickster. I apologize.
That did. I'm not gonna lie. That got me a little bit. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go on.
My wife is actually afraid of snakes, and it dates back to when she was younger, and she watched Clash of the Titans with Medusa, and that just scarred her for life.
Wow.
My stepbrother was terrified of the flying monkeys in A Wizard of Oz, and that was his thing.
Yeah, that's valid.
What about was it the Wheelies in Return to Oz?
Yes, the Wheelers.
Okay.
But isn't that whole movie basically a horror movie?
Oh, that movie is fucked up.
It is super dark, and I will tell you that is probably the last movie that scared the shit out of me. When Dorothy wakes up the heads in Mombi's closet. Freaked me out.
Jim,
mind you, I saw The Exorcist at 8 years old, and it didn't bother me. But that movie scared the crap out of me.
Jim, what do you think about Anaconda?
You want to know honestly? It's one of my favorite movies because it scares the shit out of me. I can't handle it. The best part of that movie is when the snake regurgitates John Voight and he winks.
As you do. Yeah.
Of course. But it was perfection. It was utter perfection.
Actually, sorry, but before David has to run, I'm sure. There was one more movie, Jim, that we need to talk about.
Oh God, what is it?
No. So, you know what I'm going to talk about. I know what I'm going to talk about. David has no idea what I'm going to talk about. It is the Rob Zombie opus. Muse Sherry Moon Zombie in The Munsters.
He may know how I feel about this already if he listened to the last episode because we talked about this several times.
Here's my thing with it. I will die bitter that the Brian Fuller Mockingbird Lane was not produced. If you ever saw the unfinished pilot that they aired,
my God, it was amazing.
It was so good, and they aired an incomplete pilot as a Halloween special, and even incomplete, it's still so amazing. And the subtle war between Marilyn and Grandpa, I wanted that so badly. There's just a few things that I will die bitter about. I will die bitter about that. I will die bitter about Storm Pilot and Star Wars, Poe and Finn, and I will die bitter that the BBC series Class ended with every single storyline on a cliffhanger.
Okay.
Those are probably my three hills.
Of the great unmade but should have been made movies, Alexandro Jodorowsky's Dune. I don't know if Jim or David, you know about that, or if you even like it.
I knew about it. My ex is a big Dune fan, like probably his favorite book and favorite.
There's an awesome documentary about it, which I don't even remember the name of, but I think it's called Jodorowsky's Dune. Jodorowsky is a Mexican director who made like El Topo and just crazy out there like art house madness, and like the Dune movie he was going to make was going to have like Mick Jagger and just crazy. It was just going to be crazy. But anyway, we'll get back to Jim's favorite, The Munsters, and that Brian Fuller one. I actually have never heard of that. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah,
it was pretty amazing. I was really disappointed that they didn't make that a series.
Man, I wanted to live in that house. That set. I was like, could I just have the set?
On that note, did you watch 666 Park Avenue? It was on around the same time.
No, I remember it. It picked up. It picked up after Ugly Betty and got the Vanessa Williams,
Yeah,
right?
Vanessa. Yes, and it was it was a bit slow in the beginning, but the last half of the season they had already heard that they were being canceled, and they just went balls to the wall. It was insane. It was great.
I love it when a show just decides to pull out all the stops, and they just like, look, if we're going to be canceled anyway, we might as well just go crazy with that stuff.
So my recommendation for you then, David, if you haven't seen it yet, is Evil on Paramount Plus.
Okay, I'll look at it. Oh yeah, I've seen the trailers.
It is. It just keeps getting more and more bizarre with every episode. It's great. I love it.
Right. If I do not watch it, I will recommend it. My partner is super into horror, so
Just don't let him talk to Mark.
How much is he into horror? Would he like to come on this podcast?
I will ask him. What I really like about Brian's approach to things is that if he likes something, he likes it, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
He tends to not like to be too critical of things, and I really appreciate his perspective on something. He says he quotes a movie where he says hating things is boring. And I just think that's such a great, when he likes something, he just tends to be he doesn't like to discuss or dissect. He just like, I like that or I don't like that. And he leaves it at that. And I just think that's such a great perspective. I wish I had more of that sometimes.
I totally agree. You know, these people that nitpick ridiculous things like people I mean, they're the worst of the worst. I mean, the real killjoys of the world. We need more light and brightness and positivity.
Yeah, I got those barbs there, Mark. Thank you.
Oh, I wasn't talking about you, Jim. I don't know.
Oh, no.
Under the bus. You did that to yourself. We'd be totally like, we're always open for guests to come on. So
yeah, anytime.
He's totally invited.
Well, and if not, my friend Veronica, who's a writer herself, she is also a massive horror aficionado. They have made me watch like Moose. Have you ever seen Moose?
Mm-mm.
It was this Canadian comedy. They kickstarted it. They made it for $60,000. It's a horror comedy. It is atrocious. There's puppets. It's wonderful. It's absolutely freaking bizarre.
I'm gonna have to look this up because I do love me some puppet horror.
It is
if you haven't
fantastically seen it. Terrible. I loved it. Psycho Beach Party, which is actually one of my personal favorite movies.
Great movie.
So they tend to drag me into watching things like Happy Death Day, and they're like, okay, this one's funny enough that David will enjoy it. And
have they made you watch Dead Alive yet?
No.
I need to talk to your partner. We need to have a conversation.
The last one they had me watch with them was Velocipaster.
So I've
seen that one.
I did not like that one.
It's just so stupid. It's so wonderfully 80s and so stupid. Just the bit at the beginning where the car blows up.
Yeah,
they just put a placard that says "Burning car here."
Okay.
So here's my opinion. That's the sort of movie that's trying to be a cult movie, right? I think like there's certain movies that are so bad that they're awesome, but the director and actors are trying to make a good movie, and that's really what makes it so good as bad. Like you can have like Sci-Fi Channel, you know, the 30-headed shark one, like
Frankenfish.
Frankenfish was actually
it was great.
But if you look at like a Birdemic or a Troll 2, these sort of movies are just hilarious because they're earnest.
They think they're making great cinema.
Yeah, they're trying to make something great, and it's just awful.
So I'm sorry, David, before I cut you off, you were going to talk about Krampus, I believe.
Oh, no, just Krampus is in that same vein of, you know, kind of comedic horror, but not too scary for me to handle. I'm not good at jump scares, so I tend to actually jump. A friend of mine forgot that and took me to see Aliens at the midnight movies here, and he was laughing the whole time because I kept jumping.
I'm not going to lie, that's one of my favorite series of movies. My favorite sci-fi series is the Alien series. I love all four of them. I do not count Prometheus or Covenant in that series.
Or
they're garbage.
Or Alien versus
or Alien. because again, they're garbage.
David, something which might be along the lines that you might want to watch on Halloween is Trick or Treat, which is an anthology movie, which I don't know if you've seen.
Yeah. It's got the little pumpkin head kid.
Right.
Sam.
Now, it's not overtly horror, but there is comedic elements to it. But it's just a real fun movie.
It really is.
I liked The Babysitter. That one was funny.
That was a fun movie. The sequel sucked.
Yeah, I kind of heard that. I haven't seen the sequel. I'll give it, it's 90 minutes. I'll give it 90 minutes of my time.
There's another movie, what is it? Samara Weaving was in called Ready or Not. That was a lot of fun also.
Oh, I liked Ready or Not with the wedding. That was fun.
That was a fun
aunt. The old great aunt with the purse at the wedding. She was great.
Yeah. My favorite was Andy McDowell because I haven't seen her in anything in eons.
That was fun.
Yeah, it makes a good double bill with The Hunt.
Yeah, The Hunt was good with Betty. What's her name? Betty what?
I don't know. She's great.
She was
Glow.
And she was phenomenal in Glow. And Glow is one of those shows that I'm still sad got canceled. I'll die mad about that too. Glow was phenomenal.
Are you watching Physical? That was pretty good.
Nah,
it was sort of in the same vein. It's this lady gets obsessed with jazzercise.
That's a really good hook.
Yeah, it is. I watched the first season and a half, I guess, and then I don't have Apple TV anymore, so I don't watch it anymore. But it was pretty good. I liked it.
Yeah, I was surprised. I liked The Hunt. I thought The Hunt had a really. I liked the vibe of it. It had a nice fun.
Yeah, agreed.
Jim, you've done a nice job trying to talk about other things rather than Rob Zombie's epic.
You picked up on that, did you?
Epic movie, released worldwide on Netflix. The Munsters.
It looks like it was made for $3.
I don't know who this was made for.
Nobody does.
I think you just really love The Munsters. Everything I've read in reviews, and at some point I'll probably sit down and try to watch it.
There's no way that movie got made with somebody loving The Munsters, because that is an abomination just from watching the trailers.
No, I disagree. No, I think so. Okay, so here's what I think about Rob Zombie as a filmmaker. I think he is a good director when he wants to be. I think some of his movies have been really lazy, and he said so. I think he needs to stop writing his goddamn movies and casting his wife and these horror, like in this one, Doctor Who's in it. McCoy, Sylvester McCoy's in it, and that was the last Doctor Who I ever watched back in the day. I stopped watching Doctor Who.
I've never been a Doctor Who fan.
A Whovian, I think it's called. But he needs to get somebody to write something. Now, I can't knock him. Jim, what do I always say about movies that I dislike?
Even when you don't like them, you like them.
No, I'm happy that other people do.
I have not heard one glowing. Well, I've also not listened for one, but I've not heard one good recommendation. Most people hate this movie.
Again, I just wonder who it's aimed at, because the people that watch The Munsters or like The Munsters are at least your age, Jim, or older, growing up.
In other words, your age?
Well, let's not bring me into it. But it's got juvenile humor that would only work for like a kid's mentality now. It has none of kind of the charm that the original series had. It certainly doesn't have the...
There's a reason for that, though. It's because his wife is starring in it.
You mean...
She has zero charisma.
Oscar winner, Sherry Moon Zombie?
I do. And I'm sorry, David, I don't mean to sound horrible, but that woman drives me insane every time she's on screen. The only reason she's on any screen is because her husband is directing the movie.
David, as you're not a horror fan, have you ever seen a Rob Zombie movie?
I haven't, but I know enough to know that they're probably going to be way too dark for me. So
he made one good movie, and that was House of a Thousand Corpses. and it was only good because of Karen Black.
I think his first two movies were good. I think he's got a good eye as a director, again, when he wants to apply that. I just think his writing, he doesn't know how to write.
And to contrast that, I love his music.
I think he blew his load in his first couple of movies, even though those were basically just copies of other movies. But they were, with a kind of a Tarantino twist on it. But like, we talk about with David on here about trailer parks.
Yep.
Rob Zombie did not grow up in a trailer park. He would like you to believe he did, because that's the persona he has. And the movies that he writes are generally through the lens of, what if somebody from a trailer park wrote this? That's who I am, and I can connect with people just by throwing in curse words every 3 seconds. No, that's not engaging, and that's not entertaining. It's just overkill, and it's just done there for shock.
I don't know. I do use the F word a lot.
Who, you?
Yeah.
Well, I know you fucking do.
It's generally when I'm working on computers, though.
No, but that's okay. But if you're writing a script, you don't have to have every single character. Okay, so I'm writing a script. Okay, Janet enters the scene. What the fuck's going on here, you motherfucker? What the fuck are you talking about, you cunt? Oh, fuck you. Okay, are you making breakfast? No, fuck you. Okay, do you want some fucking eggs? Of course I fucking do, you whore. Okay, end scene. I'm like, you don't need that for every single movie.
That is literary gold there, David, in case you want to, take down some notes.
I'm just imagining it as like
do not patronize me. I got my lawyers on the phone. Right.
So my sweet spot in entertainment is smart and sexy that poses as dumb and dopey. And
give me an example.
Oh man, Detention. Have you seen the movie Detention?
No.
Okay, comedic horror. Absolute. Do not watch the trailer, because what the movie is, and get no spoilers. What the movie is not what the movie pretends to be. It is the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen. And then the more you watch it, you're like, this is actually secretly brilliant. There are all these little tiebacks, but it is such a bizarre mind trip. I would love to see what the two of you thought of it.
I will put that down. I wrote it down.
It's kind of like The Ring. I will make my friends come over and watch it, because I need someone else to try to understand this movie with me.
That's how I was with Dead Alive. That was like a rite of passage. If you were going to come over to my house and sit down for a movie, you had to watch Dead Alive with me, just so I could laugh at you getting grossed out by everything that's going on the screen.
Brian was watching it one night, and we were sitting next to each other. He had it on mute and was watching it on headphones. And about 5 to 10 minutes in, I'm like, okay, you're going to have to put this on speaker and start it over. I need to figure out what is going on in this film. It also has probably one of the most creative opening credit sequences I've ever seen.
Okay. So, Mark, we'll pencil that into our schedule.
I think I have seen. Have I seen this? I don't. I might have. No, probably not. I'm sorry, David. I have gone against your word. I've read a little bit of the synopsis. No, I have not seen this. But that looks interesting.
Oh my God, it's got Josh Hutcherson.
Yeah, but it's
okay. I love him because he is such a great comedic actor. So I'm all in on this one. I will watch this, and I will let you know what I thought.
Did you watch Future Man?
I did. I loved it.
This is very much in the same vein as Future Man.
Oh, fantastic! Then I'm gonna love it.
Jim, can you recommend one horror comedy for David to watch for Halloween?
Zombievers.
Zombievers?
Yes. Zombievers.
All right, I'm writing
Zombievers.
Because my other horror comedy would have been Evil Dead 2, because I consider it a horror comedy, but that'd probably be too dark.
It is not too dark.
This looks terrible. I'll check it out.
It is. It's awful. But it's if that doesn't get you, then Santa Jaws. That was another good one.
Definitely try Moose. Moose is If you drink, definitely have a beer because it shouldn't be watched sober.
And if you want a Thanksgiving treat, you could try Poultrygeist. And then for Christmas, you have the Ginger Dead Man series. That is fantastic. Gary Busey is a killer gingerbread man.
You also, Jim, for Thanksgiving could have Thanksgiving.
Oh, I did see that last year, and I had not seen it before.
Yeah,
Poultrygeist is still my go-to, though.
That's a really cool. It's a musical.
Yeah.
I'm writing all of these down to watch the trailers when we're done.
I'm trying to think of what other really good horror comedies I like, because my favorite is Tucker and Dale is one of my favorites.
Yeah, Tucker and Dale.
You already mentioned that one. It is, because it's just a comedy of errors. The whole movie, it's great.
Just the whole like poor hillbillies as the guys keep dying and they're trying to save them and just keep making it worse.
Yep.
Those poor guys.
What about you, Mark? What is your go-to horror comedy?
So I think Return of the Living Dead is one of my favorite horror comedies.
I've never seen.
Night of the Creeps.
Night of the Creeps is great.
Evil Dead 2, as you said. I think Evil Dead 2. Like a lot of these are going to be 80s.
Then if we're going to go 80s, we could do Ghoulies. That was great.
No. I'm just looking around and get my son poster.
Another one you can look up, Attack of the Killer Donuts. That was pretty fun.
I saw Ghoulies as a kid my mom kept us very sheltered, right? Yeah. And I hadn't seen any kind of horror movie or anything like that. I wasn't even allowed to watch He-Man because of Skeletor and the magic. So
really?
Yeah. So my friend's mom dropped us off at the theater and we watched Ghoulies and I had nightmares for days.
Oh, wow.
I'm just thinking of kind of trashy comedy classics. And I go to Frankenhooker.
That was so that movie scared the crap out of me as a kid. I was probably 10 years old and I snuck downstairs after my parents went to bed and turned on Cinemax and it was on. So that movie scared the crap out of me.
So basically, David, the plot for Frankenhooker is a up-and-coming doctor has a girlfriend who unfortunately dies in a lawn mowing accident. He decides to rebuild her using parts of hookers. So he creates super crack that they smoke and then explode, and then he uses their body parts and he creates his Frankenhooker.
The final scene in this movie, I swear to, I kid you not, I ran up the stairs. I got so freaked out.
So he creates. Sorry for the spoiler. So he creates his Frankenhooker wife, but obviously she's like a Frankenstein clone, but made of hookers. And like her main line is "Want a date?" and that's what she says to everyone. Also by the same director who is Frank Henenlotter, Brain Damage is another amazing sleazy. He also did Basket Case too.
Basket Case was a great flick.
But Brain Damage is amazing. That it's just it's a movie about a parasite who injects like a hallucinogenic drug into the back of somebody's neck so he can go feed.
Okay. I'm taking frantic notes here and typing them all out, and I'll get
Jim, are you taking the minutes that you can send to David?
Well,
no, but I have a recording.
So I'll just have to listen to it again,
Right. This will be forever out in the ether once I get done editing some of the audio. So it'll just force him to actually have to listen to us again, Mark.
Oh, well, I don't even listen to me.
Aw.
Oh,
Mark, did you want to say something to my mother? I believe you threatened to tell my mom on me because she listens to the podcast.
I will not throw you under the bus, Jim, with your mom. I've decided to have some pity on you.
That's very kind of you, sir.
David, Jim's mom is our number one fan.
She
That's
is.
awesome. That's nice of her.
I could tell you a story about Jim's upbringing, though, and you might be like,
Oh,
huh?
sweet Jesus.
Do you know Jim and his mother when they were growing up? Jim, how old were you when you watched The Entity?
9, 10 years old, somewhere around there, between 9 and 11.
So David, the Entity. Jim, do you want to explain it to David? So I don't
I don't
know
what point you're trying to make, but the issue.
So okay, so I'll cut through it. It's about
What you're trying to say, but it's going to come out wrong. Go ahead, you tell it because it'll be much more entertaining.
It's basically a ghost raping a woman.
Ew. Okay.
For an hour and a half.
So it is not. There's one scene where she's graphically getting raped.
The other ones, it's not graphic, but
exactly.
That makes a difference. And this was an early childhood favorite of Jim and his mom.
No, my mother's favorite, one of my mom's favorite movies. She let me watch it because there was no sex. She didn't have a problem with me seeing a naked body. There was no sex, so I was allowed to watch it.
Okay, there was sex. It was just a ghost.
Invisible sex doesn't count, Mark.
We had very different mothers, Jim.
We did. I did. And I would not trade my mom for the world. Wow. So anyway, there's a scene. What Mark is trying to impress upon you is there's a scene where the actress's blouse gets ripped open and you can see where the ghost is touching her on her breasts and all that. And Mark is pretty astounded by the fact that I thought, none of that bothered me. I just thought it was really cool how they made it look like there were hands when there was nothing there.
And this is Barbara Hershey. I don't know, David, if you know the actress.
I do know who Barbara Hershey is.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so Barbara Hershey is basically being raped throughout this movie by a ghost. And this was Jim and his mom's Sunday afternoon movies to watch.
Okay, in all fairness, we watched it one time. I did not see it again for 15 years.
This is quite a shift from Beaches, I'm just saying.
Well, the whole reason we had this conversation is because at one point in my younger years, I worked at a dry cleaners, and I did Barbara Hershey's dry cleaning, and I told Mark the story, which led us to talking about The Entity.
Oh my gosh, I really don't know how we got here from where we were.
Welcome to our podcast. So
yes, David, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Your upbringing was very conservative.
It's very funny. I was raised I was raised in this very rural environment with a lot of folklore and ghost stories and horror around me, but it wasn't something, it was taken very literally, very seriously, right? So my mother became very involved in branches of Christianity that dealt with, believing in demonic possession, believing in spirits and things. So I didn't grow up with anything supernatural as an abstract, as it were, right? It was it was all around me, and which was kind of sad because as she got deeper into it after my parents divorced, she took away Halloween, right? Because Halloween was evil, and that was so sad. Halloween.
What branch of
Pentecostal evangelical, so very much in the speaking in tongues and that kind of stuff, and she passed away about a year ago, and we were able to reconcile really well a few years before she died, which was good. But she did become very conservative as time went on, and very much limiting in what kind of media we could consume and what we could read. And again, I think the hardest thing was when she took Halloween away, which was what kid doesn't love Halloween? So,
right. But the funniest thing is, if you want to read a book full of sex and violence and incest, well, you just open up your Bible.
That's been a really funny conversation. Well, I don't know if funny is the right term, but during this whole book banning conversation, as people are trying to ban books in libraries and schools, other people countering and saying, well, if we're going to ban books with, this kind of controversial content, we're going to have to ban the Bible.
There was actually a lawsuit filed in federal court for a gentleman, I think out of Jacksonville or Daytona.
I think they won. I think
Did
they
he?
did take the Bibles out of like a school district or libraries or something.
I'll have to look it up. It's a really interesting conversation because again, it's I firmly believe in every library should have that phrase. Every library should have something to offend everyone, right?
Agreed.
And I think particularly public libraries should be open to having everything that they should have to be available to people. So
Our local Barnes and Noble, whenever you walk in, there's a table that said, "These are books that are being banned or have been banned," all in one table.
that's
like,
pretty cool.
but like, and I'm not going to go down the religious route, but I mean, the Bible is based on two people having incest, and they're trying to teach morality to people. Okay.
Well,
Yeah, but I grew up. She definitely had this belief that there were spirits and things all around us, and that they could affect our day-to-day life. And that certainly affected me as a kid in a way that you can definitely see it in my writing when you look at Adam's relationship to the spirit world and how it's always just there for him. It certainly was, infused into the way that I perceive things.
And it's funny, I mean, you find people that are not religious, but also believe like spirits are real, right? So it's not even just a religious thing. So you can have it across the spectrum.
and then you have my childhood where my mother would have her friends outside or hide behind a dresser, and she would hold a quote unquote seance for us just to scare the crap out of us so that we'd go running up to our bedrooms.
Your mother sounds amazing.
She was awesome.
Hey, Jim, when are we going to get your mom on the podcast? I would like to pick her brains.
I will have to discuss that with her.
I think you should have a whole episode of just, anecdotes of her scaring Jim.
Yeah, I think that would be great because there's so many.
What's the recording limit on Anchor? Is it like 7
There
or 8?
isn't one.
Oh, okay. We could do
there isn't one that I know.
Sort of thing.
That would be fun. The hard part's going to be convincing her to get behind a microphone. But I'll talk to her. I'll get that into the works.
Tell her she gets to tell stories about when she scared you. That might be an incentive.
Yeah, there's yeah, she has some stories, that's for sure. I'll let her know.
Okay, Jim, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Should we release David from our prison?
Well, I don't consider it a prison except for the fact that he has to be here with you, sir.
It's a prison of joy, Jim.
Oh, is that what it is?
Nobody wants to leave. We have to kick them. Okay, David, thank you so much. I mean, we're just an upcoming little podcast. We don't even know what the hell we're talking about half the time. So we really appreciate you coming on, and certainly check out David's website. David, do you want to plug yourself?
Sure. So you can find me at davidarslayton.com. Don't forget the R, otherwise you'll find some Florida man types. But if you just Google David Slayton books or David R Slayton books, I'll pop right up. That's the easiest way to find me. I'm all over social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm not hard to find. And again, if you're listening to this podcast and you would like a copy of White Trash Warlock on Kindle, just email me. My email address is there on the website, but it's author@davidarslayton.com. Just email me with a subject line, horror. Let me know that you found it on the podcast, and I will send you a Kindle code for my first book.
David, I cannot thank you enough for being here tonight. You have no idea how excited I've been all week for this to have this conversation.
It was really great meeting both of you, and you especially, Jim. And I will have some goodies for you in the mail as soon as I can grab your address from you. So.
Hang on, David. What do you mean, especially, Jim?
Well, I think the fact, Mark, that Jim and I have he both looking for urban fantasy with gay characters as a lead, that kind of thing.
I'm the minority on this podcast.
So Mark was really concerned about being in the minority on this podcast today. So
as a straight white male, I mean, I feel persecuted on a daily basis in America.
Okay, Tucker Carlson, shut up now.
Well, you can always head back to Northern Ireland if you need to.
Oh, see, I like David.
No, I don't like the weather over there.
I think, but no, it's just time that we gave a little bit back to the sport that's given so much to us. How's that?
There you go.
Well, we really appreciate it, David. Your partner is, we're welcome to have your partner, anybody wants to come on and talk about horror.
Right.
At any time, just let us know.
I'll try
Absolutely.
to connect you with my friend Veronica. Actually, I think you guys would all have a blast.
That would be fantastic.
And Mark, drop me an email address, and I'll give you an Audible code for my book.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.